While the whole world is focusing on how much money can I make from Web3 and can I make money from this token, you said, no, forget all of that. That's interesting. But here's a technology that can be used in a very different way and can change lives. Kimbal, great to see you, my friend. Really good to get you on Real Vision.
Thank you so much for having me.
Listen, I'm really excited about this conversation because I heard you speak in Utah and I was just floored by some of the things you're doing. But before we get into all of that, let's go back a bit in the past and give people a bit of your story for those who don't know you and how you got into what you're doing now, because it's an amazing story in its own right.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, it's an unusual, long and winding road. I started out, I grew up in South Africa and I came to Canada to study. And my brother and I were determined and excited to be in America and become, pursue the American dream. And we found our way to California in 1995. We built a company that was the first maps and door-to-door directions on the internet. Very, very technology forward, like the backbone of that technology. Yahoo acquired us in '99.
Why did you come up with that idea? Why did you pursue that of all of the things?
We were so excited about the internet. We were really kind of brainstorming on what would be a good use of the internet. And we thought that the yellow pages with maps and door-to-door directions tied in would be cool. But the reason we even knew that door-to-door directions existed was somewhat of a accident. My brother overheard a conversation that there's this company called Navtech that was building the navigation software for Hertz Never Lost, which was a piece of software and hardware that had not been released yet. And Hertz had put $300 million into this technology to make it possible in their rental cars so people could find their way around, never thinking about using it for the internet. And we asked them, we kind of found our way to their offices and we asked them, and we were 22 and 23, if we could use their data and put it on this crazy thing called the internet. And it was hilarious. They didn't really know what to do with us. So they made us sign a one-page contract that basically said, you can use all of our content, but if you ever make $1 on it, you have to call us and we have to figure out a deal. And it was incredible. So we got this amazing software and data set that Hertz had literally put $300 million into, and we got it for free. And for about a year, we used it and they were so happy because someone was using it. And we built this amazing thing called an interactive map where you could use your mouse and drag it and zoom in and zoom out. And I mean, if you've never seen that before, which up until that point, no one had ever seen that before, you just could you're picking your jaw up off the floor. I mean, it was so incredible. So we got funded by a venture firm and, worked very hard to build a business. It was actually a super tough company because, as you can see even today, there's no money in yellow pages or door-to-door directions and maps. It really belonged as part of a search engine. And so for many years, we were trying to build a business, but actually the business was not really there. And so it did find a nice home at Yahoo, and it became a big part of the internet. But it's pretty cool. We managed to, we were part of the early days of the internet and creating something that is still today used, 10 times a day by the average person.
Amazing. So what was the next part of your journey after you'd sold that?
So my brother went and did PayPal, and I helped him. I stayed as an advisor. But my passion was food. So I went to New York to learn how to cook, and I went to the French Culinary Institute.
Where did that passion come from?
I've just cooked since I was a kid. I love the community that comes from food. When I was 12 years old, I started cooking for my family, and it was beautiful. I would cook, and the family would, this is a very intense and busy and high energy family. We would sit down and we would connect. We'd get to know each other's day and get to know each other a little bit better. And it was really beautiful. It was something that I kept with me all the way through college. I would cook for all my friends. I didn't have any money, but what I would do is I'd go get this, I don't know if it's sold in the US, but in Canada, it's called Kraft Dinner. And it's basically macaroni with powdered cheese, which would cost me 39 cents per box. And then I would get wiener sausages for the cheapest thing you can possibly imagine. And for about $10, I would feed 40 or 50 of my friends with a giant pot of macaroni and cheese and sausage. And like that sort of stuff. It wasn't so much about is the food fancy or whatever. It was more about the community of bringing friends together.
And then you went to the French Culinary Institute. How was that?
It was hardcore. The French Culinary Institute is, at least it was, it's now called the International Culinary Institute. It was very French, very old school. The closest analogy would be this movie Full Metal Jacket, where the sergeant just basically screams at you all the time. I used to joke that I'm not going to cooking school. I'm gonna go to this place where they're gonna scream at me for 6 hours, and afterwards I'm gonna say thank you.
And then that led you into the restaurant business.
Yeah, so I actually graduated just before 9/11. I was never planning on doing the restaurant business. I never thought that would be my path.
It's usually the worst thing to do. It's great for your vanity and terrible for your pockets generally.
You know, it's funny. Until COVID came along, it was actually a pretty successful restaurant company. That doesn't mean you make much money, but you don't lose money.
Yeah, which is a good thing in restaurants.
Yeah, it's a good thing. But, it doesn't compare to the technology world where you can really strike gold. There isn't really gold in this business. It's more of a passion. I had this amazing opportunity to cook for the firefighters after 9/11. And that's where I sort of realized, wow, this is really powerful. This is the connecting to people to each other through food. It was almost like I just couldn't not do a restaurant. It was, I had all the skills. I felt the love of it. And so I did a road trip around the US. I didn't want to do it in New York. And I did a road trip around the US with my wife at the time and found this town, Boulder, which I think I'm still here 20 years later. It's the most beautiful place to live in the country. Opened a restaurant called The Kitchen. The farm to table was a concept that sort of came about in the 70s, but no one had really figured out how to systematize it. And so it really just was there a couple of restaurants, Shape in Eastern California, there was one in London, but it really wasn't really a thing. And my co-founder, Hugo Matheson, came from this restaurant in London called the River Cafe, which was another farm-to-table restaurant from the 70s.
Which is one of my favorite restaurants in the world.
One of the most amazing restaurants. And he challenged me to say, hey, why don't we try and do this in Colorado? And we talked to farmers. We said, hey, this is what we want to do. There was a lot of mistrust amongst farmers, between farmers and restaurants back then. And a lot of it had to do with we just didn't understand each other's business. Restaurants really have to manage food costs. They for the most part, have to know what the menu is ahead of time. In our case, we said to the farmers, okay, fine, we will change our menu every day as long as you get the food to us by 4 p.m. And then we will rewrite the menu based on whatever you're growing. But you have to give us a price that makes sense. And that was very attractive to the farmers because they always had extra produce. A lot of the food waste actually happens on farms. And by saying that to farmers, whatever you have, you bring it over, we'll figure out a price, but it's fair price. But we'll take whatever you've got. And it worked so well for a long time. It didn't scale because, of course, that is very hard to scale. But what I started working with them on was, why don't I set you up with email? Why don't I encourage you? I didn't buy them a computer, but they didn't have computers. I was like, you might want to get a computer. Here's how it could help you. And this is 2004, right? So even though it was 10 years after the internet, farmers just didn't have computers. There were no smartphones. And now, almost 20 years later, all of our farmers and many of the farmers around the country now are part of proper supply chain systems. And so they're able to grow amazing food for local restaurants. And farm to table has become a movement that we really help kickstart, which we're really proud of.
Amazing. And what led you then into learning gardens and that whole idea? Because it's an extension, this is a journey, and it's very clear that it's a journey that you're going through. So the next part, you obviously read about farm to table, realize that people can grow food. How does this next idea come into your head?
So we had an employee of ours named Bryce Brown at the kitchen who said that many of the kids in Boulder don't have any understanding of food. His grandfather works in New Zealand, or at the time worked in New Zealand on school gardens. And he asked if we would support him to do that. Not 100% from the kitchen, but the kitchen would provide philanthropic funding, and I would as well. And he would go raise money from other people. And he created a nonprofit in Boulder called the Grow Foundation. And for a few years, we funded him on that, and I joined his board. But it wasn't really scaling. It was a beautiful local nonprofit, and I had at that point now gone back into technology. I was working on a real-time search engine, which is so it's basically the ability to search for what's going on right now. So if you type in Tesla Motors, you'd learn not just here's their website, but you'd also here's the news about them, here's some tweets about them, things like that. So it was a company I was building in the 2000s. But I'd left food, and I was pretty unhappy that I'd left food. There was much better chance of making money, but it was not my passion. And an incredible, probably worst and best thing that ever happened to me, I went down a ski hill in 2010 on an inner tube. It was a children's run, so not supposed to be dangerous. And the tube flipped. I was going 35 miles an hour. I landed on my head. I ruptured my spine at C6 and C7.
Ow.
And I was paralyzed for 3 days.
Wow.
And I had a real come to Jesus around my life. Just this fact that I was putting all of my energy into technology, clearly useful stuff. I mean, don't get me wrong, that's good things, but it's just not my passion. And what I decided in that hospital, if I was going to be okay, and the doctors were, by the way, saying, you're paralyzed, but this is a way you were broken your neck, we can fix you. So they were telling me I would be okay, but I obviously was hard to grok that when you can't move your body. And I just told myself that if I did survive this, I would focus on food and focus on kids and food in particular, helping kids connect to food. And so when I got out of, it was 2 months of being horizontal. When I got out of that, I talked to my co-founder, Hugo, and to Bryce, who was running this nonprofit, about, hey, could we do something that's more scalable and reaching many, many more schools? And so this concept of the learning garden, my wife at the time, Jen Lewin, designed this incredible modular system that we could build in a factory and build thousands a day if we wanted, if the funding was there. And it would be easier to teach in, it would be ADA accessible, it would be have the irrigation built in. So it's very, very sophisticated system. And in the process, Bryce decided he just wants to focus on Boulder. So I decided, well, I'll just do it outside of Boulder. And we created a nonprofit called Big Green. And from 2011 until COVID, so 2011 to 2020 or early 2020, in 9 years, we built 650 learning gardens across the country. These are 2,000 square foot, $70,000 outdoor classrooms, teaching 350,000 kids each day, training teachers on how to do that. It was beautiful.
And what are you teaching the kids?
Primarily science. So what we learned to do was, rather than say to a teacher, you have to do something extra in the garden, we said, we're going to work with you on your science curriculum and simply show you the lessons that you could do outside if the weather is nice and you want to do it. And so the teachers didn't have to create new work. They just said, oh, this particular science lesson, I'm not sure if you know, but in America, we know literally what paragraph on Tuesday, March 27th, the teacher has to be teaching. So we actually know that to that level of detail. That's just built school core curriculum in America. And so it gives you the power to build lessons that on that morning we can say, here's the lesson. We'd send them an email. Here's the lesson you could teach in the garden today, designed in conjunction with other teachers. So we had a easy 10,000 teachers in the network designing lessons and sharing them with each other. And it was just a beautiful, beautiful program.
So cut to the pandemic. Talk me through your crypto journey, because this is where these two very different worlds come together in a way that I think is very clever. So talk me through your crypto journey. Talk me through all of that, and then how this all comes together, because it's great. I love it.
Yes, it is an amazing, what's the right word? Discovery, almost, because it's almost like an invention. We were basically, what we were doing prior to COVID was now against the law. You're not allowed to do general construction on school grounds. Still to this day, you're not allowed to do it because you're bringing people from outside of the school into school grounds. Because of COVID, that's not allowed. Obviously, schools were even closed for a year and a half. So obviously, there's no teachers to teach, no kids to teach. So really devastating for Big Green that we couldn't do what we love. And July of 2021 came along. We were expecting to go back into schools And we were told that it would be another year of not being allowed to be on school grounds. And so it's okay for us to kind of say, we'll take 1 year pause, but it wasn't really okay to say, we really don't know when this is going to come back, if ever. And so we changed our model, and we said to ourselves, we're well supported philanthropically. We have a great reputation. We've been doing food justice work for 10, 11 years at that point. What if we take a different approach? Why don't we try to, instead of traveling to Detroit and building gardens, why don't we try to fund someone in Detroit who could work in schools? And if you're local, you can sometimes get around the rules because principals will just kind of let you in. But if you're a national nonprofit, you just can't. And so we started to reach out to nonprofits to say, hey, would you guys be interested in building learning gardens in schools? Would you be interested in training teachers on how to teach science in the garden? Would you be interested in other forms of food justice? And we really learned that the answer was yes to everything. Yes, they would love to build learning gardens, but we also found teachers saying, you don't even need to work with a nonprofit, just fund us directly. We will build it in our school. And so we would send the equipment to the school, and because if you can't get an outsider to come in, the teacher can do it though, because they're part of the school community, and they can bring in the parents to build the garden. So we now send the equipment of the learning garden full setup to a school, and a teacher with some funding, and a teacher will put it together in partnership with their facility staff and with parents. So that one thing started to happen, which we thought was pretty cool. But the other nonprofits we were reaching out to were saying, well, we don't really feel comfortable doing learning gardens because it's really not what we know how to do. But we do these other things, and we do these other food justice work. Would you be interested in supporting that? And at the same time, I was learning about this concept of a decentralized autonomous organization.
Where did you get into that journey from? I want to hear the crypto side of stuff. You obviously must have dabbled and suddenly end up in DAOs. Talk me through this bit, and then we'll bring it all together.
It's actually amazing. I had never bought a coin. I had never bought an NFT, and I was super fascinated with DAOs. So to me, the Web3 world is not any one of those things. It's kind of like a blend of these extraordinary inventions. I was really fascinated with this idea that we could bring nonprofits into a community, a DAO, and they would help us in a crowdsourced kind of way figure out where the funding should go. And I also have seen a lot of inequity out there and a lot of power disparity. And this was a very cool invention that would share power in a very transparent way, but also in a very equitable way. Everyone gets an equal vote. And it also scales essentially infinitely, which is very cool. You don't kind of do something and, oh, well, it's not going to last forever, but you could do it for a little while. Actually, no, if you do this, it can last forever. I like that kind of, that kind of reminds me of the internet. If you work on the internet, it's useful forever. It's very cool, and it scales essentially infinitely as long as the internet continues to grow. So I had this friend of mine named Bear Kite, who's a Web3 evangelist, and he and I, we were neighbors in our home in Baja, and I would have him in my ear about DAOs all the time. And his view of the world, or many of the Web3 people's view of the world, was around some way people could make money, or a tool that could be built that would be used by people. And again, it's a business model, it's for-profit work. And nothing against that. I do a lot of for-profit work, but I wasn't really interested in that. I was interested in the nonprofit side. And I also didn't feel comfortable endorsing any coin. So, because that it just didn't feel right. And so I said, well, what if there's a way we could do a DAO for philanthropy? And so in partnership with him, as well as an amazing DAO architect named Matt Markman, we brainstormed we built a white paper, and you can go to DAO.biggreen.org, and you can read the white paper, or the light paper. It's going to be turned into a white paper as we get to the end of this year. And the idea was to put decision-making power into the front lines of food justice. So we would go to nonprofits that are working in the front lines in Detroit or Atlanta or Newark or these tough communities and say to them, join this DAO. The way you join is you have to be funded. You have to receive funding. And once you receive funding, you get to vote on the people who then get funding after you. You can't vote on yourself. The nonprofits said, I mean, honestly, these are people without a Twitter account. It reminds me of working with farmers in 2004. They don't have a Twitter account. And I said, you got to have a Twitter account, even though that's not necessary for Web3. In the world of Web3, kind of have to, right? And and I said, and then you're going to have to set yourself up with a wallet so you can vote. And they're like, what do you mean by a wallet? You mean like the one I carry in my pocket? So the onboarding was amazing to teach these very BIPOC, interesting, food justice warriors who work with their hands in the soil to get onto a web browser and download MetaMask and learn what that is, just kind of grok what a Web3 wallet is, and then to explain to them the power that they actually have is something they've never had before, and it's real power. In fact, what's nice about Web3 is it's all written there. All the code is there. If you follow the rules and don't break the rules of the DAO, no one can take your vote away. You're a member of the DAO. It's decentralized autonomous organization. There's no one with central power. And that is just something that blew their minds. And so we launched it in Q4 of 2021. And we moved very fast, which was really cool. Another great thing about Web3 was the speed that we could move at.
You even had the guys from the Constitution DAO helping you work on this.
Yeah, we had the Constitution DAO. We had probably about 50 Web3 contributors. That I got to give a great thank you out to the Web3 community, because when I was working on this, I really didn't know what I was doing. I didn't say, oh, I'm a Web3 expert. This is going to be an obvious use of it. It was more the other way around. I think this could be used, we could use Web3 to scale this idea. Okay, who do I need to talk to so I don't do something and I'm just totally wrong? And so we spent at least 2 hours with about 50 different Web3 folks who themselves spent a few hours outside of those calls on the white paper, as well as giving us feedback. And it was a Google Doc that we allowed anyone in that group to comment and give us their feedback. And as a result, we came out with a white paper that I think is really effective. It is true to the Web3 ideals. It is true to the philanthropic goal of this. This is not a money-making DAO. This is a way for a donor to put money to work in a way that matches their ideology.
So explain how it works. So if I come as a donor, it then gets distributed by the DAO, decentralized manner, to the individual top projects in kind of underprivileged areas, and it's allocated by the people themselves.
Right. So if you're a donor at a certain level, right now you have to donate over $100,000 and you get a vote as well.
Right.
But if you're under $100,000, we will start including them as voters once the experiment is over. We're just not 100% sure how to do that. The donors can vote as an equal donor to the nonprofit. So if you are a donor, you don't get like 100,000 votes. You get one vote. And if you are a nonprofit, and you're a recipient of whatever dollar amount, you get one vote. So how much money you put in does not affect your voting power. And we chose that intentionally to not let a donor kind of ruin the goal of the DAO, which is the DAO, right? Which is to decentralize decision making. I put $1 million in to kick it off. Wasn't sure how it would be received because brand new, no one's ever seen this before. And in the past 6 months, maybe 7 months, we've raised over $6 million, and we have almost 2,000 donors in the DAO at an average donation of like $900. It's just incredible.
And how many participants are in the DAO on the other side? So the recipients. So how big is the DAO essentially now?
We really also wanted to be careful not to move very fast in the size of the DAO. So Matt Markman came up with this concept of progressively decentralizing. So it started with 6 nonprofits. Big Green's one of them, and then 5 real incredible nonprofits that we knew very well, that we trusted, that were on board to figure out Web3 and be leaders in the DAO. Leaders, spiritual leaders, not like voting leaders. They get the same vote as everyone else. So we have 6 nonprofits in Q4 of 2021 that were the leaders in the DAO, and they chose 10 nonprofits to join in Q1 of this year, so February, March of this year. And then the DAO, we're kind of in an experimental phase, so the rules are a little flexible until we firm them up. But the first round, Big Green chose. Second round, those 6 people chose. So we grew from 6 to 16. And then in Q2, so April to June of this year, we added 2 donor votes. So I'm one of them and another donor. And the 18 of us, so 16 plus 2, voted on a pool of maybe 100 nonprofits that were asking for funding in food justice. We chose 36 of them. We used quadratic funding to do 1 round of votes, where it's a 2-week-long process where you can go in and do your vote. Oh, if it was up to me, I would give this amount of money to this nonprofit. I would use this much budget for this quarter. And then the system is called Ethelo, ETHELO. And what happens is it'll tell you, okay, great, you've put your vote in. Combined with all the other votes, here's where it kind of ends up. And now you can actually go back and change your vote. And so you have a full 2 weeks to collaborate over Discord between other voters. And it was a phenomenal community building exercise, because you're learning about not just of course the other voters, but the other potential nonprofits are also on the Discord. You can ask them questions, you get to know them. And so by the middle of June, we had decided on the recipients, and it was, I think we gave away about $720,000 to 36 nonprofits, so anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000 per nonprofit. It was honestly an experiment still. I would say that things broke several times. People were still struggling to be onboarded, and there's all these growing pains, and yet everyone was super psyched. I mean, I don't know if you've ever done grant making at scale, but when you have 100 nonprofits that are asking you for funding, it would take you 1,000 hours to decide who gets what. And what we did was a crowdsourced approach with 18 of us deciding, and we definitely all spent a few hours on it, no question. But because they're in the Discord, because you could talk to them, there was a sort of a sense of trust between the nonprofits and the voters. We were able to do that without having to have this huge overhead that any foundation would have to have.
And how does the reporting go back into the DAO structure? So the DAO makes the allocation of funds. Obviously, it wants to see some sort of ROI, whatever the metrics are for that, and whether the project was successful and the capital was used efficiently. How does that process work?
Well, I think that's what's so beautiful about a DAO. So because we're decentralized, not only do we get regular communication over Discord between all the nonprofits, as the DAO grows, we are geographically dispersed. And so people who are doing work in Atlanta, a nonprofit, will have other members of the DAO in that same city. And so there'll be some on the ground review of the work, just anecdotally, because people will connect with each other. And then there'll be regular communication over Discord. And a nonprofit cannot ask for more funding in the same year. So 1 year from now, they might choose they want to ask for more funding, in which case they have to burn their token, and they can nominate themselves to receive more funding. And the Discord will be where the community will review their work, and the nonprofit can choose to put whatever they want up there.
Oh, so to get a following year's funding, you need to have another token in the DAO, and the original one gets burnt.
That's right. So you have to, and we believe that will be a way for the community to evaluate the nonprofit and decide whether or not they deserve another round of funding.
Fascinating. I mean, really interesting mechanics. The thing that really hooked me on this is I've been talking about this for a while before I saw what you've done, thinking DAOs are an obvious way for charitable organizations to coalesce all of these ideas from people. Because you think of stuff like World Wildlife Fund, amazing, but it's a decision-making hierarchy of which, if we donate any money, we don't really know where it goes, and we feel like
you would have no
most
idea.
needed projects don't, and people get frustrated, and it's a whole complicated world of philanthropy, as you know. But this, I think, is scalable for everybody.
It really is. It's also transparent. So you might disagree with what the group or the DAO decides to fund, but you will know exactly what they funded and where that money went. And you can even make an argument in the Discord saying, hey guys, I disagree, and here's my argument, and hey, hopefully we can make a change in the next round, because you're part of the community. With traditional funding, Big Green, World Wildlife Federation, Big Green was a nonprofit, it still is, by the way, we still do nonprofit work besides the DAO. If a donor provides us funding, and it's the same goes for any nonprofit, we might say, this is going to help support 10 learning gardens, but there isn't really it really goes into a pool of funding, and we do our best to approximately hit that goal, but it's not tangible to the donor. It's not transparent to the donor, and it is hierarchical. At the end of the day, I'm the CEO of Big Green. I decide, and thankfully people do trust me, but it's way better if there's just total transparency. So there's this concept of trustless in a DAO that is pretty cool, where there is, of course, an element of trust in everything. But what's beautiful about a DAO is you get all of the information and you are asked to participate in the process. There's no better way to be informed.
And I think it can scale even larger, even for campaigns for big philanthropic organizations, for famine relief or whatever, where the specific needs, it can get allocated, distributed down to very localized levels really effectively in ways that just wouldn't happen by people on the ground who know what's needed.
I think that this scales extremely well whenever the information on the ground is distributed. So one great example is deforestation. So if you try and do support a nonprofit that is trying to stop deforestation, you're going to support someone in, I'm making this up, in Sacramento, and they work in the Amazon as well. The Amazon is huge. And so if you are expecting a wonderful, good, well-intentioned, good-hearted nonprofit in Sacramento to do a good job of protecting the Amazon, you're just pretending in your mind. There's no way. But if you can get people on the ground across the border of the Amazon, Brazil, Ecuador, Peru, and get them to join a DAO and say, you're going to receive funding to help figure out how to protect the forest, how to protect the Amazon. And then you're also going to participate in this Discord, and you're going to let us know how it's going. And together, as a DAO, we're going to protect the Amazon. And you don't need to be in the same geographic location. And you have this incredible scalable technology, a blend of Web3 tokens to Discord to even Twitter, that to me kind of makes up the Web3 ecosystem. You can protect the Amazon rainforest effectively, cost effectively, in a transparent way, and in a decentralized way.
Because, one of the key things I've always thought about, like, we've got this beautiful little island here called Little Cayman where I've got a house and it's untouched. And it doesn't really appear on big, environmental charities because it's a small little place. But the people who live on that island really care. And they will do anything. And with small amounts of funding to regionalize local people, you can make probably a larger difference than a large amount of funding to one thing.
Absolutely. Not only that, the overhead required to, so if you're a foundation, let's imagine you want to support, in fact, we have this amazing nonprofit we support in the US Virgin Islands, which is maybe a similar comparison to the Cayman Islands. It's US territory, so under the Big Green is a 501c3. Under US law, we support US nonprofits. So that is a United States territory, and it qualifies as a 501c3. But they're a small nonprofit. They can't do outreach onto the mainland. It's very hard for them to be seen from foundations in America. But a foundation has to spend, or is able to spend 15% of their budget on administration. So when they get all of the grant requests, they might give away $100 million a year, but actually 15 million of that goes to overhead. So they only give away 85 million a year. And in addition to that, if you're a nonprofit, you're allowed to spend 25% of your budget on fundraising. So you take another 25% out of that, you're down to under 60 million. So you've lost 40 million in the process to give funding away. In a DAO, you have we have a 5% overhead, because there is cost, of course, to just managing the DAO, but none of that cost is the same kind of cost. So the nonprofits who are participating do not need to have a fundraising budget. They need to simply engage in the Discord. In the case of the DAO treasury, we use crowdsourcing to determine who receives the funding, so we don't need the administration budget either. So we're now working with a much higher pool of funding, and most of our money goes to the nonprofits versus almost half going to administration on one side or the other. So if you think about that, those folks in Little Cayman, where you are, if they were to try to receive funding from national, international foundations, they would need a huge budget. And the foundation giving them their money would also need a huge budget just to figure out if that's the right recipient. And in a DAO, they're equal. They're seen as equals, whether they're based in New York City or they're in Little Cayman. If they're working on the cause, that matters to the donors.
I mean, it's a really genius idea. One thing I'm interested in is when you look at their allocation of funds versus how you would have done it in your head, how has the crowd done this versus your expectations, where you've gone, wow, I didn't expect that? Have you noticed any kind of differences from it being DAO structured versus your own, if you were the king of the asset allocation?
So I have been the king of the asset allocation for 10 years, and I'm embarrassed to say that they are much better than me. And we should have done this a long time ago.
In what way? How do they do it differently than you would have done it? Where it stops you and you've gone, wow, that was a good idea. In what way is that happening?
It really does. I look at the voting process. So participating as a voter is really what opened my eyes, because I joined the quadratic funding system on Othello. I've made my votes, and there was even in the process of making votes, you realize the quality of the nonprofits that have come on are fantastic, and they are all kind of, there's some relationship with the other members of the DAO. So you kind of have this sort of this seed of really well-intentioned, trusted true justice warrior that then have another grow their trusted circle to be the next group, and then the next group. And so you actually have these nonprofits that are 2 degrees separation from people that I actually trust. Like, I truly trust them, and they're not people I don't know. I know them well, and you end up with a community of nonprofits that were truly phenomenal. There were rock stars in the space from all over the country, including U.S. Virgin Islands. And then in the process of choosing how much funding they should get, I watched what the other nonprofits were doing, and I'm learning from them. And we end up with a result that I do think leverages the knowledge of people on the front lines, people who actually know these people who actually know the geographic area. So in the case of Little Cayman, it would be members of the DAO from Little Cayman nominating other members of the DAO that could join from Little Cayman. There's just no way I can be better than them.
No, that's amazing. So how are you going to you're still going through the learning phase, and there's, you're still ironing out all the wrinkles, but soon, the next year or 2 years, whatever the amount of time is, you'll have done something really interesting that needs to be shared with a lot of people, not just for your own purposes, but because this architecture of what you've built seems like it's going to be a much more efficient way for philanthropy, in particularly these kind of very projects where it can get really at a micro level. How are you going to share that with people? Have people come to you already and started saying, what the hell are you up to? This is interesting.
No, it actually has been wonderful. We've gotten many foundations, many philanthropists that have come to us and said, for example, the deforestation one was one where could we use your technology or your white paper, or frankly, could you do it for us? And my answer to them was, really give us a few months, right? We really want to get through this experimental phase. and they have they're watching closely. And so our experimental things end September 30th. We have 55 members of the DAO now. This the next voting round has already kicked off, where we're now in the final fourth quarter, essentially, of our DAO. We started in fourth quarter last year, so the third quarter this year will be the end of it. And what we're going to do is we're going to now use 55 voters to vote on this next round, and we now start to get into this pretty scaled DAO. It's no longer just 6 people choosing 10. We're going to be maybe choosing 100 this time. And I think that if the last quarter is any sign, this next quarter will be very successful and very effective. Because we know we're very efficient, but how effective are we is going to be interesting.
It's amazing what you're doing. I think it's a brilliant idea, both with food justice. I'm a huge supporter of that, and also the self-sufficiencies of small communities of growing their own foods and some of the things you're passionate about. But then stumbling across this much bigger idea in this that is really possibly going to change philanthropy forever in the ways that so many of us don't like, because of how little money goes away and how the decision-making process happens, and turn it completely upside down to create something supremely efficient, while the whole world is focusing on how much money can I make from Web3 and can I make money from this token. You said, no, forget all of that. That's interesting, but here's a technology that can be used in a very different way and can change lives. I think it's brilliant. So well done.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I've also been, I got to say thank you to the Web3 community. The philanthropy that's come out of you guys has been amazing. Whether people are donating $10 or donating $100,000, there's a real desire in Web3 to be philanthropic, to show that the Web3 community in a Web3 ideology, not of course.
Do you accept crypto yet? Do you accept crypto yet? Do you accept crypto payments yet?
No, we are all about it, and I know we've been accepting crypto prior to doing the DAOs. To be clear, we love crypto, but the philanthropic desire in Web3, what I think the sweet spot we've hit, and anyone who wants to form a DAO like this will also benefit from it, is that you're asking philanthropists that have done very well from Web3, whatever version of crypto they've succeeded in, and you're saying to them, here's a way to be philanthropic inside of your own ideology. You can do it in a Web3 way, and that's really how we've done so well. I think I do believe people care about food justice, but I think the primary reason they've been supporting us is to show that Web3 can be used to create a new way of philanthropic giving. And
I'm sure you've thought about it, but clearly there's an opportunity for NFTs.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I mean, I think, as a way of fundraising, the way of people showing that they are part of this movement, this organization, an NFT has value for that, and gets you to feel like, because as you said, smaller donors don't get a vote, but if they get an NFT to prove that they're part of this, they can create their own communities around this as well.
You're absolutely right. We do have an idea that I won't share right now because it'll be cool to share at the right time, that will be leveraging NFTs in a way that is, it's a badge of honor, of course, as you just described. They can proudly say they're part of it, but it's also a way, we believe, for us to grow internationally. So one of the challenges with our current structure is that when people make a donation, we give them a tax deduction. It's an IRS-governed treasury. And so we really we're stuck in the United States. And if we do NFTs, those NFTs, they could be any price. They could be $1, they could be $1,000. And they're not subject to the IRS restrictions. And it would enable us to go to Little Cayman or to the United Kingdom or to other places. So I think we are pretty excited about that, exploring that path.
And also, I love the idea of, and I'm exploring quite a few things like this, of all the donors are like-minded people, but they're not connected to each other.
Yeah.
But if they have NFTs and there's a way you can connect them. Now, who knows what magic comes out of that? There's magic when you put people together with kind of similar missions in life, and they can come from diverse backgrounds, whatever it may be. But there's something about building a community around what you're doing, whether it's in the narrow defined concepts or the broader concepts, that I think is incredibly powerful. There's a big unlock to come from that too.
I completely agree. The Web3, no matter what you say about philanthropy or not for-profit work or whatever, because there's always there's always benefits, there's always pros and cons or whatever. But the one thing you cannot deny is the incredible superpower that Web3 has for creating community. It is something like I've never seen before in my life. The community we're creating in the Big Green DAO is just extraordinary. I mean, it's just absolutely extraordinary. And doing that with donors through NFTs is a great way to continue to build that community.
Brilliant. Kimbal, listen, thanks very much. And I can't wait to hear back from you in about a year's time to see where this crazy journey's gone from here.
That sounds great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Hey there, revolutionaries. Thank you for tuning in. For more content like this, head over to realvision.com/crypto and get unlimited access to the most brilliant minds in finance and crypto. Join our community of lifelong learners for exclusive access, unparalleled education, and unbiased insights.